We're diving deep today into what looks like a monumental national gamble in Nepal. They built two incredible, gleaming new airports. The Pokhara Regional International Airport, PRIA, what was it, a $216 million project.
That's right. And also the huge Gautam Buddha International Airport, or GBIA.
Exactly. And these facilities, they're meant to be these concrete launch pads for a prosperous future. They're symbols of ambition. But here's the critical pivot. Our sources suggest that just beneath the polished surface of this 21st century infrastructure lies, what can only be described as a ticking financial time bomb, a serious looming debt trap.
And that profound disconnect. I mean, the gap between the engineering success and the commercial failure, that's precisely what we need to unpack today.
Right.
When you look at an investment of this scale, the usual metrics, passenger volume and all that, they're actually quite misleading. The key is what we call the airport viability equation.
The airport viability equation.
Yeah, and it's not about how many passengers you can get through the gates. It's all about the value that each of those passengers generates.
That sounds a bit counterintuitive. I mean, how can an airport be full, yet still be financially crippled?
Yeah.
Isn't a high load factor the main goal in air travel economics?
It is, but only if your passengers are, say, high-yield tourists or business travelers. The analysis of Nepal's current aviation model, it relies so heavily on low-yield labor traffic.
Right, flying to the Gulf states and Malaysia.
Exactly. And that model is, well, to put it bluntly, it's mathematically incapable of generating the profit you need to service the debt on these new high-cost facilities. They're simply too expensive to run on cheap fares.
So the central question for you, the listener, is really existential. Can Nepal execute a strategic pivot fast enough to capture genuinely high-yield international traffic? Or will these massive projects become, well, colossal white elephants by 2026?
And 2026 is the key date here. That's when the repayment pressure on one of those loans becomes absolutely critical.
This deep dive, then, is a critical analysis of how this 21st century infrastructure got shackled to what is, fundamentally, a 20th century aviation strategy.
And we're looking at months, not years, to resolve this.
Okay, let's unpack this financial crisis.
Yeah.
I think we need to start by contrasting the two airports because their financial foundations are worlds apart, and that's really where the crisis begins.
Right.
So GBIA and Bhairahawa, this was largely financed by a soft loan from the Asian Development Bank, the ADB.
Right. And ADB money is what we'd call patient money. It's development financing.
Yeah.
Meaning it's manageable debt, the interest is low, maybe around 1 to 1.5%, and it's structured with a really long grace period. This kind of financing, it understands that big projects take time to get going. It allows for that gradual ramp up.
Okay, so that's the manageable one. Now let's contrast that with PRIA in Pokhara. You call this the financial time bomb.
It is. The Pokhara airport was financed by a $216 million commercial rate loan from the China Exim Bank.
This is hard debt.
Hard debt, so not development aid. Not at all. This isn't soft patient money. It's a commercial transaction. We're talking significantly higher interest rates, shorter repayment windows, and it demands immediate commercial performance.
So they essentially take out a commercial mortgage on a building with no commercial tenants.
That's a perfect way to put it, and that distinction right there is the root of the entire debt crisis.
Okay, help us visualize the sheer weight of that. If we're conservative and say, estimate a 2% interest rate on the commercial part, which is about $162 million after the grant, what's the immediate financial pain?
The pain is acute. I mean, that translates to an annual interest payment of over $3.2 million.
Wow.
And listen, that's the bill before the government pays back a single cent of the actual loan. This has to be paid year after year, whether a single plane lands there or not.
Okay, so let's put that in context. The Civil Aviation Authority of Nepal, CAKN2, that's the body that runs all the airports. Historically, their net profits were only around $7 million total before the pandemic. Are you saying that one airport's interest payment, just the interest, is consuming nearly half the profit margin for the entire national aviation system?
That's exactly what the numbers show. It is an immediate operational drag on the whole system. It means CAN has to divert revenue that's earned from Kathmandu's busy airport just to pay PRIA's interest.
Which starves other essential projects of capital.
Precisely. This isn't just a slow start for a new airport. It's the very definition of a debt trap. The debt burden is consuming a disproportionate share of all revenue, and it's stifling any chance of future growth.
The economic miscalculation here seems, well, astounding. Treating a massive commercial loan as a simple tool for public infrastructure.
Especially in a sector where the demand was completely unproven. Look, an airport's revenue is entirely speculative. It relies on policy. To even approach break-even, let alone service that debt, PRIA needs at least 1 million international passengers a year.
And in 2023, how many did it have?
It handled virtually zero scheduled international commercial passengers. It's a massive financial emergency unfolding in painful slow motion.
This shifts the focus from financing straight to market strategy. Because if low-yield traffic is the problem, the simple answer you hear is, oh, just get more international flights.
Which dangerously oversimplifies the issue.
We need to talk about yield.
We do. Yield is the average revenue you earn per passenger per kilometer. It's what determines if you're profitable or not. We have to look at the low-yield segments that are dominating Nepal's main airport right now.
And those segments are?
They're primarily two groups. First, the majority. Migrant workers flying to the Gulf, Qatar, Malaysia. And second, what's called VFR traffic visiting friends and relatives, mostly going to and from India.
So why does that kind of traffic fail the profitability test for these expensive new airports?
Because it's just so price sensitive. The flights for labor traffic, they're usually block booked by recruiting agencies.
So they negotiate huge bulk discounts.
Exactly. It drives the price per seat way, way down. And these passengers, they're not buying business class tickets. They're not spending much in the high margin airport retail stores or lounges.
I see. So while the traffic keeps the planes full, you get those high load factors. It just doesn't provide the profit margin you need to support the huge fixed costs of a modern airport like Pokhara.
That's it. You're filling a brand new highway with cheap cars that can barely afford to pay the toll. What these airports desperately need is high-yield traffic.
The kind of passenger that flies business class stays in five-star hotels.
And uses specialized tourism services. That's where the real value is.
So what are the actual high-yield targets these airports should be laser-focused on?
For GBIA, the solution is immediate and it's crystal clear. The International Buddhist Pilgrim Market.
Right, because of its proximity to Lumbini.
Exactly. A single flight from, say, Colombo or Bangkok carrying tourists on a multi-day pilgrimage generates, exponentially more value through hotels, transport, and tourism fees than any labor flight ever could.
And for Pokhara, the one with the really acute debt problem.
PRIA's primary value proposition is as a direct premium gateway for high-end adventure and leisure tourists, the people traveling from Shanghai, Seoul, Tokyo, European cities.
Who specifically want to bypass the congestion of Kathmandu.
Yes, and what's fascinating here is the evidence of the policy failure, the fact that they have failed to secure even one scheduled flight from China, the very country that financed the airport, is the starkest evidence you can find of a catastrophic market failure.
And that strategic failure, it leads directly to the core of the issue. A lot of the internal debate has been about the hub versus point-to-point model. This is where it gets really interesting, because that whole debate is fundamentally flawed.
It's a dangerous distraction. We need to debunk this illusion, and quickly. Nepal cannot be a hub.
Why not?
Geographically, it's completely shattered by colossal established hubs like Delhi, Dubai, Doha. It lacks the scale, it lacks a massive home carrier like an Emirates, and critically, it lacks the market gravity to pull in transit traffic. They're dreaming a dream that died 20 years ago.
So abandoning the hub illusion is step one. If the current point-to-point model with low-yield traffic isn't enough, what is the only viable strategy?
The only viable path forward is the niche gateway model.
A niche gateway.
It's a highly targeted point-to-point approach. You treat each new airport as a unique, specialized portal to a world-class destination, instead of trying to make them compete with regional giants.
Let's detail those niches then, because this seems to be where all the policy effort should be focused.
Take GBIA. It has to be positioned as the sole international gateway for the Buddhist circuit. The policy has to be laser-focused on attracting carriers from Buddhist-majority nations: Thailand, Sri Lanka, South Korea, Vietnam.
And offering them tailored, irresistible incentives.
Right now, yes.
And PRIA in Pokhara needs an equivalent brand. The sources suggest marketing it as the Annapurna Gateway.
Precisely. It's the premium entry point for high-end adventure tourism, for trekking. The immediate target should be direct flights from high-value secondary cities in China, like Chengdu or Kunming, plus South Korea and Japan. It's a strategy of intentionally bypassing the old, congested routes.
This strategy mirrors the success of smaller, specialized airports elsewhere. I'm thinking of a place like Paro Airport in Bhutan.
It's the perfect parallel. Paro is an exclusive, high-value gateway to a unique destination. It knows its niche, it controls access, and it charges a premium for it. Nepal needs to embrace that idea of exclusivity and value, not try to compete on volume and price with New Delhi.
Which brings us right to the core problem.
Yeah.
The primary obstacle here isn't the lack of infrastructure, the airports are built and ready to go, but pure policy inertia.
That is the tragic reality of it. The true bottleneck is Nepal's reliance on these archaic bilateral air service agreements or bases, and a really deep-seated protectionist mindset.
A mindset designed to shield the national carrier.
Decades ago, yes. But now, those same agreements are actively deterring global carriers from even considering Pokhara and Bhairahawa.
That sounds completely backward, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's like building two magnificent new highways, but the government refuses to lift the tolls on the old, crumbling road because one company owns the rights to the traffic.
That analogy perfectly captures the situation. The government is protecting a perceived asset, the national carrier, at the direct expense of $2 billion national infrastructure assets. And on top of that, you have external constraints compounding the problem.
You're talking about the Indian airspace issue.
Yes. India's reluctance to grant new air entry points over its territory for flights going into Pokhara, well, it limits access from the west and south. It forces potential routes to be circuitous and commercially unviable. So you had a policy issue compounded by a geopolitical hurdle.
So we're looking toward 2026. That's the year the repayment pressures on that Chinese loan become critical. The fate of these assets is going to be decided by policy actions in the next, 12 to 18 months.
That's the window. And our sources lay out 3 stark scenarios for what could happen.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, scenario A, the white elephant. This is basically the status quo scenario.
So restrictive policies stay in place. International carriers just stay away.
Correct. The airports pile up massive losses, and the Civil Aviation Authority of Nepal defaults on the commercial Chinese loan. This could trigger severe sovereign credit implications for the whole nation. They just become these expensive, lasting symbols of squandered potential.
Okay, not good. What's scenario B?
Scenario B, the slow bleed. This is where you see some incremental, minor progress.
So maybe 1 or 2 low-cost carriers, a few seasonal charters.
Exactly. It generates some revenue, but it's nowhere near enough to cover costs and that critical debt servicing. The airports survive, but only because they get continuous cash injections from CAN. They become a persistent, draining liability on the national budget.
Which leaves only one aggressive path to actually making this work. Scenario C, strategic pivot.
This is the critical policy intervention. The government has to form a high-powered task force, something empowered to bypass the old bureaucracy and grant traffic rights unilaterally for those targeted high-yield markets outside traditional BASA rules.
And offer aggressive time-bound incentives.
Absolutely. Things like waiving landing and parking fees for the first 2 years for any airline that commits to a scheduled service from Shanghai or Seoul.
This kind of shift would send a powerful signal to the global aviation market that Nepal is finally serious about attracting high-value tourism.
It's the only way to capture that market and escape the debt trap before the window closes. The alternative is just, well, it's too devastating to contemplate.
So this deep dive has really laid out the hard truth. The romantic, build it and they will come strategy has completely failed. The debt for Pokhara is a clear and present danger to Nepal's economic health. The choice facing the government seems brutal. Either protect a single struggling airline and its outdated model, or save $2 billion national assets by finally dismantling those protectionist policies.
And this raises a really important question for you, the listener, to think about. If a nation builds a technically advanced, commercially financed asset, but its own existing regulatory framework actively prevents that asset from earning any revenue, is the project a failure of engineering? Or is it, more fundamentally, a failure of governance? It suggests that in modern economic development, policy reform can't just accompany the project, it often has to come first.